name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Today, we meditate on the nature of water. The whole story of the Samaritan woman centers around Jacob's well. If anyone here has been to the Holy Land, they know it is a desert place, a place of no water. So any place where there are springs of water are places of life. And Jacob's well was special, not so much that Jacob built it, though of course that's true, but he built it in such a way by the blessing of God that it gave him water, his children water, and even his cattle water. And the well didn't fail. It was abundant. So Christ comes to this well, and he's coming on foot because he moved around humbly and yet speedily with haste. And it was the third hour, as it said, which is 12 o'clock by our reckoning, the middle of the day, the heat of the day, and he was tired. So no one could say later on he was deliberately missionizing to the Samaritans. That he was there out of his human weakness and, of course, divine providence. And he met this woman. And a shocking thing happened. He asked her for water. Now, for those of you who do not remember who the Samaritans were to the Jews, there was a time when that whole area of Samaria was owned by the Jews. They bought the mountain. They built their villages. And then when they fell away from God, the Assyrian king took them, put them into other regions, and put them into slavery. And with all this free infrastructure, he put his own people there, the Assyrians. But God protected this area. And he sent lions unto the Samaritans to kill them. And it was to such a great extent, these attacks, that the king was approached and said, "You got to help us out. Lions are eating us." So he approached the Jewish people and they explained to him, "This is our land promised to us by God. And God is defending it." He says, "What should I do?" He says, "Send Jewish priests to teach them the law, and then they'll be saved from these lions." And the Samaritans came to the Lord, but not completely. They only accepted the first 5 books, what we call today the Torah, the books of Moses, and didn't accept anything else. They also remained quite a period of time with idolatry at the same time, though they were later converted. And here, the Jews come back from their imprisonment, from their slavery, and they find this area occupied by the Assyrians. These foreigners have taken their land, have taken their inheritance, have taken their promise from God. Because the Assyrians, they considered themselves too the children of Abraham, because Abraham was from Chaldea. And they accepted the 5 books, but no others. And the Jews said, "They have taken from us." And there was a great enmity between them. Moreover, that because this place of life, this place of Jacob's well, was in their minds the place where the sacrifice of Isaac was to have taken place, they considered this their place of the mount, the temple of the mount. And they built there and they worshipped there. So Jesus comes and he asks this woman of water. And she doesn't directly accuse him because there's no rules against the Samaritans interacting with the Jews. But the Jews were forbidden from contact with the Samaritans. It was a one-way street. And she sort of questions him, says, "How is it that you, a Jew, are addressing me?" Sort of like, "Hey, in case you didn't notice, you're not allowed to do this." He says, "Give me water." And then he explains in a way that boggles the mind. He explains openly who he is to this Samaritan woman, this stranger to Judaism. He explains to her that if you knew who you were talking to, you would have asked of me living water, and I would have given it to you. And this water is not common water like this water in Jacob's well. It is a greater water. It is a water that springs up like a spring inside you, and you will never thirst. What do you think that water is, brothers and sisters? It's the grace of the Holy Spirit. Think about the nature of water. When we're dirty, we wash with water. If we have a fire, or in spiritual terms, the fires of the passions, what do we put out fires with? With water. Water sanctifies. Water refreshes. Water strengthens. When we're thirsty, we drink water. And Christ is promising living water, moving water, active water, water that increases in abundance till it overflows. So much so that there's plenty to give to everyone. In fact, we should. We're obliged to give to everyone the water that we received, the grace. And he says to her, bringing her to this point where she realizes who he is, because clearly she wants this water. She is ready to abandon the old water of Jacob's well for this new water that Christ promises her. She says, oh, go get your husband. And she, didn't want to sort of offend, and she wanted to sort of hide her sin. Says, oh, I have no husband. Says, you speak true. You don't have a husband. You have 5 men that you've been with, and you had a 6th. And she says, truly, sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Consider that. If they only accepted the first 5 books of Moses, there were no more prophets after Moses. And yet she comes to this radical realization as a Samaritan woman that this is a prophet of God. Can you imagine when you have built your life around opposition to something, that all of a sudden all of that is overcome? And she doesn't run away from him, from this accusation that she's been with 5, 6 guys. She doesn't attack him in return. She is amazed. She is amazed, in awe of who this man is that knows everything. And she leaves her pot. This thing, that's the only way for her to get water from the old well. She leaves it. She leaves it behind. And she goes and tells the whole village, I think there's something we need to see. I think there's a prophet. I think there is the Christ. Because Christ revealed himself to her at the well. He said, I am he. I am Christ. I am the Messiah. He speaks plainly to the Samaritans, where all around him, his Jewish countrymen that he came to first, that he instructed his apostles and disciples to minister to first, he hid in many ways. And yet, he opens up this truth to her because she's ready to receive it. And she is an evangelist to this city of Samaria. She's an evangelist. She's like an apostle to this land, saying, come and see. And they're so impressed with what she's saying that they beg Christ to stay for 2 more days. Please tarry with us. Please stay with us. And he teaches them. And they say, now it's no longer what you said, not on the basis of your own personal conviction, but on what we have heard, that we know that this man is the Christ, that this man is Messiah. And this must have been a hard lesson for them. Because what did Christ also say at the well? That salvation is of the Jews. That you got the wrong spot. That the temple is in Jerusalem. And yet, they accepted this. And when the apostles come, they see this going on. And Christ says, when they ask him, are you hungry? He says, I've already eaten. I'm not hungry. And they're asking, who gave him food? Because they love him. They want to care for him. And he says, I have meat that you don't know of. I do the will of my Father. It sounds so complicated, so mysterious, but think about what he just did, what he just accomplished. God accomplished the salvation of the Samaritan people. To do the will of God for Christ was to bring salvation. God's will is to bring salvation. And for that, he is hungry. He is thirsty for our salvation. And it fills him when we are converted. And he gives us this living water that overflows within us. He outlines this perfectly when he says that we're waiting 4 more months for the harvest, but I can see a harvest is ripe. The wheat is ripe and ready for harvest. Other men have sown, the Old Testament prophets, the books of the law, but you will reap. If anyone ever tells you that's non-Orthodox, oh, don't pay attention to the Old Testament, we don't need it, we're under the new grace. This one story of Christ's life, you can always point to them and say, but these people were converted because other men sowed, and now we reap. That we can't discard the old for the new, but it's all together. One miraculous journey into as much as we can perceive the mind of God and his interactions with his people. Brothers and sisters, you've been all given a gift. And you also give a gift. You've received the gift of salvation, but the gift you give through receiving it worthily is you've fed the Lord's hunger for our salvation. This great spiritual upwelling that refreshes our thirst, that cleanses our souls, that puts out the fires of the passion, that gives us eloquence before people that we've never spoken to before. We've been hesitant to talk about Christ before, perhaps in the workplace. Someone says something stupid. Oh, I don't believe it's that. It's like, hey, did you ever think about this? We have miraculous icons. Do you know what they are? Wow, I thought miracles stopped 2,000 years ago. No, happens today. We have so much that we can share by the grace of the Holy Spirit. We have so much that we can share because we are cleansed, because we are sanctified, because we are enlightened. That all of this is not just for us to put on a shelf, but for us to share with our families first. It's pretty hard to be a missionary out into the world and you're having fights with your brothers or sisters. You have hostility in your family, without peace, without reconciliation. That's your first mission area. Start with your family. Then go out to your friends and other people. But this is a grace that's meant to be used. So don't put it on the shelf. Enjoy the living waters that come from God. Participate in them, bathe in them, be strengthened and sanctified with them, and then go out and preach. Amen. Through grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God the Father, the communion of the Holy Spirit be with you.